everyone, just a quick reminder that we have our Q&A episode coming up in the beginning of February, and we still need some Q's to A, so please go to genrevision.com, search for the post on the front page with the Riddler on it, and comment in the comments section with a question you'd like us to answer. It can be about anything. You can also email your questions at genrevisionpod@gmail.com, tweet at us at genrevisionpod. Just get us those questions to A.
This episode of Genre Vision is brought to you by our premium subscribers on Patreon. Becoming a premium subscriber on Patreon gives you access to an extensive library of bonus content, which includes things like monthly currently consumings, exclusive episodes, and much, much more. All this can be yours for $5 a month if you go to patreon.com/genrevision.
Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is Genre Vision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And this week, we are at the concluding chapter for now with maybe our favorite director as far as this show is concerned, Neil Breen, and his most recent film, Twisted Pair. We'll be diving very deep into this most recent movie, but before we do that, a couple calls to action. We absolutely have to acknowledge something that has happened in the last couple weeks. We do have a YouTube channel. It's just youtube.com/genrevision. Travis made these great videos about Fateful Findings, a Neil Breen movie, and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And the very popular podcast, How Did This Get Made, did an episode on Fateful Findings. And because we have our Fateful Findings video, we have seen an influx of new subscribers to the YouTube channel.
If you're here listening on YouTube, or if you found us through YouTube through our Fateful Findings video, hi, welcome. We are so happy to have you here with us. The podcast, the weekly audio thing, this is what we do. Like, this is our bread and butter. The Breen video that we did for Fateful Findings was just sort of an experiment. And if you found us through it, then we're just overjoyed that you did. And we're going to be talking about more Breen. This isn't a video in that same way, but I think you're going to enjoy the conversation just as much.
If you like us on YouTube and you want to listen to us a different way, go to genrevision.com. That's our website. You can see all the different shows we do, and you can find us on pretty much all the podcasting apps that are out there that I know of. So welcome aboard. All right. This is kind of bittersweet for me in a way to be talking about what is currently the last Neil Breen movie. There's no more Neil Breen for us after this at this point. But Twisted Pair, as always, it's a new Neil Breen movie, so I was anticipating it. However, if you go back, our last Neil Breen episode was on Pass-Through. While we enjoyed Pass-Through as much as we have all of Breen's films, Pass-Through was a really scary, dark, and grim movie spiritually, and I think it affected me in a way that no other Breen film has.
It was such an angry screed, and to see it coming out of this guy who so frequently in his movies is like really maudlin and kind of hippy-dippy, like the way he swung so wildly between those two aspects of Breen as a filmmaker was way more dizzying and even frightening at times. Like his whole manifesto that he spouts to the world through the news station, and that is like devastating. I mean, I really did not want to see another Neil Breen film like it.
No, and so Twisted Pair, I was actually a little hesitant about, because if it was going to be more of that, I don't know how much more I could take. However, Twisted Pair might actually be his most accessible movie.
Yeah, it's like he wanted to really make a crowd pleaser. But, I mean, it's Breen, so if you know his style, you know what to expect immediately. You know that you're going to hear some sort of majestic, mystical music, possibly on piano, and you're going to see images of rolling clouds and sky. It's a fucking given. You're watching a Neil Breen movie. And sure enough, this does it. You know, it's not trying to break convention in that way. It's trying to deliver what you think you're going to like from a Neil Breen film. And those opening credits, they're glacially paced, but, you know, couldn't help but love every second of them.
Well, this is what's interesting is Twisted Pair has pretty much all the hallmarks of a Breen movie as far as thematics go. There's some science fiction element. There is a clear disdain for the perceived people in power who really run the world and how evil and corrupt they are. He is still the only hero who can save us from everything wrong with existence.
Yeah, it's a Messiah story. There's romance.
Sure, don't worry. Neil Breen has still somehow figured out how to get actresses to expose themselves. I mean, I think this actually, no, Double Down does have actual full-on nudity, but there's some risque stuff in this that I was surprised by.
Sure, but it is not nearly as horny as like Fateful Findings. It's just like every woman that appears on screen is braless, and you know, like we said, Neil Breen is the ultimate bra burner. He just really wanted all those bras off for Fateful Findings.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is Breen. I don't know. I don't want to say compromised, but I do feel like he pulled back on certain things to be more broadly appealing. But there's still a certain Breen essence that exists in this. It's not compromised. It still feels like a vision from his head. The plot revolves around two Breens for the price of one. You have identical twins, Cade, the good twin, and Cail, the not so good twin.
I mean, you're doing a disservice by not giving their surname. Cade and Cail
Altair, yeah.
Which it's explained in the opening monologue, of course, delivered by Breen. That
Drew, who else?
Sure, who else is going to deliver narration in a Breen movie? That they're twin brothers. There's some wonderful footage of these two babies. One of them who's attempting to feed the other one.
I actually said "aw" aloud. It's a really cute stock clip. My favorite thing, though, out of this stuff is he gets a nice stock clip of two identical twin kids playing on the beach with their dog, and his VO goes, "We loved playing on the beach with our dog." And I'm like, you wrote that line after you found that clip.
Yeah. Oh, well, as always, Breen is no stranger to stock footage, and I think he has actually evolved the art of manipulating stock footage to fit whatever narrative he wants and utilize it to his advantage. In that way, he's genuinely kind of the great successor to Ed Wood Jr.
Yeah, he's really transforming his stock footage in this picture. Like, if you watch Double Down, like, so much of the bulk of the film is voiceover and stock footage. And the stock footage is mostly unmodified. It just sort of plays out as originally intended. Here, he is really into his green screen. I don't know where he set this thing up, but he's really proud of it. And I was watching it, and I messaged you. I was about 10 minutes into the film. I said, Drew, I'm 10 minutes in. There hasn't been a single shot of Breen that wasn't in front of a green screen.
It's nuts. It's really off-putting. And immediately I said to you, I was like, oh no, did he get void space? Did he get MCU'd? But actually there's some really fun stuff going on in this opening 10-15 minutes, including a mannequin-faced alien god called the Force.
The Force, yeah. Evidently, the Force selected both Cade and Cail to become special, like, superhumans, and they were given a power, to quote A. Andra, but they were given missions to complete as well. But Cail, the evil twin, and you know he's bad because Cail sucks. He was not successful at his missions, so the Force took his powers away and released him from his mission duties.
Well, and these powers are said to be enhanced strength and speed, stamina, all this kind of stuff.
The ability to create freeze frames in real life.
Yeah, somehow. My note here says able to leap green screen backgrounds in a single bound.
The leaping is some of my favorite effects work in Breen's entire filmography. Like, I really don't know if he'll ever top the leaping.
I mean, there is one leap that I had a genuine, that's actually pretty good moment. It's towards the climax of the movie, but he jumps down from a balcony and he has to match the actual him down on the ground with him, mid, and I'm like, he didn't do a bad job with that.
No, I mean, you see, it takes a specific kind of brain as a filmmaker to be able to say, okay, well, I want to create this effect, and I know this effect isn't going to come together until I edit the picture. So I have to think as an editor, I have to think as an effects person and a stunt person, and I have to be able to break this down shot by shot and moment to moment to be able to match poses. You can actually see Breen's evolution not only as a filmmaker, but as an effects artist in this film. It's incredible.
It is. I mean, it's still incredibly amateurish, but there is an evolution here.
It's such an odd feeling. Do you ever play the EA game Spore?
Yeah.
Okay, so you would get the opportunity to create this little creature, you know, and you would sort of imbue it with all these little powers, you know. Oh, okay, I want to put a little spike here, and I'll put a little beak here, and I'll put little eyes here. And you kind of grow to love this. The game sucked, but you kind of grew to love this little creation of yours. And you kind of watch it grow, and you know, you're like, oh, you know, no matter how bad this game sucks, I'm kind of in love with this little thing, and I'm really impressed with how it's growing. It's my boy. It's my sweet boy. And then when you watch it sort of gain new abilities, you're like, hey, good on you, man. I feel the same thing with Neil Breen. I feel like I'm gazing into this little petri dish where this, like, you know, this thing has grown and is like starting to make its own effects in surprising ways. I'm like, all right, yeah, good boy.
And I completely agree. And if you want to check another thing off the list, don't worry. There is a green screen section where Neil Breen will have some kind of reaction to an animal. In this one, it's a freeze frame eagle where he's petting the stump that the eagle is on.
Oh God, this is so good. Astro Eagle.
Yes, fantastic. Also in this opening, I don't know if he's freezing time or something, but there's some stock footage he got of some soldiers that seem to be clearing out some ruined building. And he freezes time and then tells the soldiers, come on, follow me.
Wait. I'll protect you. Follow me. And this is classic Breen, where he'll use voiceover to substitute for dialogue as if it's something that was supposed to have been said in the scene, but he just came up with the dialogue later and nobody's lips are moving. Yeah, this is classic Breen sort of stuff. My favorite moment of that is actually a really simple line, and it's right before he does all the soldier stuff, and he passes a woman on the street in front of a fake, you know, I don't even know if he shot the woman. That was probably just part of the stock footage that he bought. And he's like, well, I'm going to have to acknowledge this woman walking through the frame in some way. So his character walks past her and he goes, good morning. Have a nice day.
My favorite one of the stock footage is he green screens himself onto a piece of video from the cabin of a private jet.
The woman walks in, and then it's very slowly she looks at the camera and starts smiling. It's creepy. She's like the Black Hole Sun music video. Her smiling, stretching up her face like some fucking Junji Ito monstrosity.
She immediately called to mind like those Twin Peaks images of Laura Palmer's face just smiling dementedly. It's so bizarre because you think I hate to focus on this one thing, but I really loved it. You think that, oh, okay, he's got this stock footage because he's talking about he's gonna fly because he works for some institution that sends him on these missions to go be a hero.
Some agency, yeah.
Yeah, he's flying back from one of these missions. So, okay, he got a picture of the interior of a swanky looking jet, and he's going to sit down. So he sits down, I'm like, okay, that's going to be it. And then in the stock footage, this woman appears and just puts her hands on two of the seats and just looks directly into the camera. It's it's like those creepy that creepy smiling woman from the Insidious movies.
Yeah.
Like, it's so weird.
Well, I was kind of giving him a little mental pat on the back, like, hey, good job, buddy. You actually kind of sat down in the right spot, and it almost kind of looks like you're sitting in that seat. And then this fucking ghoul woman comes in and starts leering at him.
It's joyous. So yes, Cade goes back to this agency and this woman who I just called her Andra too, because I don't think she's ever given a name, but she seems to be a slightly older woman with white hair. She's his contact or whatever, his liaison.
His boss with the agency.
Yes, and this is when we start to hear more of my favorite things about Breen dialogue, where he's just saying things that he read in an article, like programmable virtual reality.
AI will never replace the true majesty of nature.
Things like deep learning neural network.
Mm-hmm. A crisis, virtual reality, programmable DNA. There's this conference room of people, just a cast of characters that are just shouting ideas at one another. You know, these ideas, these concepts that Breen's just obsessed with. Programmable DNA, virtual reality.
My favorite exchange in that scene is programmable DNA. This is very serious. Programmable matter. It's wonderful, but
any scene in a movie like this that takes place in like a conference room that's almost kind of designed to be like a boardroom scene, it's always going to bring me back to that scene in Birdemic where, you know, we just sold the software for $1 million or whatever it is, and they clap for eternity.
There's things that are set up that we're going to pay off here because there's some reveals in this, and one of the things was like, okay.
One of my favorite reveals in the film, and this is before we move on here, is that Cade doesn't need vacations. He comes in and he's meeting with a white-haired boss lady that we meet before. She's like, "Oh, you'll want to take some time off before your next mission." He's like, "No, I don't do that." And she goes, "Oh, I forgot. You're special. You're special kind where you don't need vacations, but you should try some time of vacations. You don't need them, but you forgot it." And I was transported to this moment where Dan Harmon was on stage talking about the hoverboard cuck porn video. And there's a moment in that video where these two characters are trying to figure out some sort of deal, some sort of exchange that this man will get to keep the hoverboard. One of the characters says something like, "You thinking same thing I'm thinking about, I'm thinking?" And Dan Harmon says, "He speaks in origami." And it just all folds out from this central idea, you know, this improvised line.
Description.
And this is what this woman is doing. It's just this bad improv where she's like, vacation, don't need special. Yes, try.
She's malfunctioning. But in this moment, because there's all this stock footage at the beginning of some scientists, doctors touching float screen stuff. And
holographic displays. This comes up so often in the movie.
Right. And I'm like, okay, then this is a near future or something futuristic, science fiction, whatever. But then, of course, this is Breen, so there's going to be more weird stuff with this. And one of these is when Boss Lady is telling him about programmable virtual reality, the corrupt version. And she holds her hand out and a blue ball manifests and floats over to him.
It wouldn't be fun if that came back later in the movie.
Sure, but
it doesn't.
But I'm like, oh, okay, so this isn't like Fateful Findings weird mysticism type stuff where we're like, what is the black cube and all that? It's like, oh, okay, this is all technology based. Okay,
sure,
all right.
I mean, magic exists in this movie because it's a Neil Breen film.
Of course.
And there's just sort of like, you know, like that magical purple tree zone, you know what I mean?
Right, wherever the force resides.
Yeah.
It's that Arthur C. Clarke quote, you know, any significantly advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. And this will come up later because there's some other things that blew my mind about where this and when this is taking place. But I do want to talk more about Neil Breen as a filmmaker because he is evolving, like we said. And there's some stuff with lighting in this movie that I found actually pretty great. The first example is there's a part where Cade is sitting in a theater.
Yeah, I took the same note. He's alone in an auditorium.
And the voiceover's talking about something, you know, he misses his brother or something. And the actual room, the lights fade and there is a spotlight directly on him. And I was like, this is cool.
No, it actually conveys a mood. And like that's the big thing in this one is he kind of wants to go for moodier lighting, which often is just lingo for darker lighting, more contrast. And majority of exterior shots in this film are night shoots, which is totally different for Breen. And then a lot of the stuff that he did with interiors is really dimly lit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all like brand new to the language of Breen films. And I think considering who Neil Breen is and the kind of movies he makes, like he's doing a good job with it.
I think this is his best looking movie. As far as his approach to the filmmaking and his awareness of what he's doing with lighting and framing, I think this might be his most accomplished movie.
There's another scene I'd like to kind of bring this up in, but it doesn't happen until a little bit later and after a very important reveal. So this agency that he works at is actually in this building that was shot at a university in Nevada. And he's walking around in front of the university one night and he bumps into a woman. I have never seen two people so thoroughly forget how to walk through a shot. Like their ability to actually ambulate convincingly out the fucking window. And you could tell, oh, they're doing this specifically so that they crash. And they do. And of course, all the things that she's holding are scattered. He offers to pick them up for her. And of course, she rebuffs him. No, go away. You're awful. You're terrible. And he, meanwhile, is he is verbally accosting her with, "Be back at 8. Be back at 8. I'll take you out for a drink. Hey, be back at 8. I'll take you out for a drink." And she's going, "No, get away. I'll take you out for a drink. Get away."
You're forgetting an integral part of this tableau, Travis.
There's a bum.
There is the most movie bum I think I've ever seen. Like, who is just sitting in the middle of this, up against, a little bit of like railing on this walkway or whatever, who is just sitting there unfazed. And then Neil Breen starts talking to him like, "Wow, she's really attractive, isn't she?" Like, she's a looker, something to that effect. We did skip over one of my other favorite moments is this all happens when he's exiting the building that he works for this agency for. There's a part where he's looking at a case of skulls.
Oh, yeah.
And then he manifests a skull in his hands that also seems to change color at one point.
It turns brown, orange eventually. But like, it's a really fun gag where he holds his hand out, the skull dissolves into it, and then eventually he's like actually holding the skull for real, like a real prop. I was like, oh, that actual dissolve of the skull into his hand is done pretty well. Like, for an amateur effects filmmaker, like he's starting to get it. Like, it's exciting to see, like, he's not just fumbling around with this stuff anymore. Like, he's conceiving effects gags in his head that really work.
And my note for this scene is just alas, poor Yorick. It's immediately that thought. But okay, let's get back to the woman that he bumps into and seems to be berating, like, "Be back here at 8. I'll see you at 8.
We should mention that when they bumped so catastrophically in front of this college building.
And the bum.
It was pitch black outside. I can't. Let's not. He just says, "We'll be back at 8. He doesn't say 8 a.m., doesn't say 8 p.m. But it looks like 3 a.m. outside.
I'm sure it actually was, because that's the only time they were able to shoot in that location.
It's 3 a.m. We're screaming at one another, "Be back at 8. Be back at 8. I'm sure it's echoing across the Nevada desert into somebody's window. But he comes back at 8. Whenever 8 is, it's just pitch black. And he's like, "She's not here. It's 8 o'clock. Yeah, no shit, you moron." He's out there lamenting to the bum, like, "Oh, the lady I bumped into and was extraordinarily rude to isn't back." And already I'm like, oh no, this Cail guy's a real idiot. I'm not gonna like him. And then he sees her. Oh, the woman that Shirley wanted to bang me so bad that she was gonna meet me, after our horrible meet cute. And he goes, "Hey, that's the girl I met earlier. I think I'll follow her."
He says this out loud to no one but himself.
And he really puts emphasis on follow her.
Yeah. And so we get shots of her walking down the street of some neighborhood, and then a shot of him walking down the same street.
He is stalking the streets like the Shape.
And then this woman goes into her house, and then he comes in and he immediately starts attacking her and saying stuff like, "You were supposed to meet me at 8, bitch." and he says bitch like 3 times, and it's clearly the same recording of one line delivery that he just used multiple times.
Yeah, it's the same like when he cut the ear and the hand off in
I'm Here Now. Yeah.
I'm Here Now. Yeah. So, I have never seen two people more thoroughly forget how to fight.
Here was my, because the way that they're tussling, I was like, was this supposed to be slow-mo? Like, because already they just look like they're kind of, I don't know, grasping at each other's shoulders and half dancing.
But the thing is, like, we kind of know what to expect from Breen movies, where it's like the way he stages fights and the way he stages intimacy, it's always extraordinarily unconvincing. And this is no exception. And then the fucking twist of the century. They just stopped struggling and he goes, "What's for dinner, honey?" or some such thing. And my mind was, I had to pause the movie and get up. This has happened with Neil Breen movies with me in the past where we've had to just like stop for a second.
We have to be away from it. Like
he thoroughly bamboozled me.
Well, because what happens is he eventually pushes her down onto the couch and he's on top of her and they stop fighting and then they kind of laugh a little bit and he goes, "What's for dinner?" And I was like, what? What? Like, what is, and then it's never explained, like, why, because I'm like, okay, was this some role play fantasy thing? Never brought up.
Well, I liked that they didn't bring it up, but what's so strange about this is, like, it almost seems to be an awareness of what he does and, like, the pitfalls of his style of filmmaking, like, you know, the fights and the intimacy being unconvincing. And then he takes that expectation that we would have of going like, oh, this is just Breen doing what he normally does. And then he's like, what if I turn that completely on its head and really tear the rug out from under these motherfuckers? And it worked. I mean, I was gobsmacked by this reveal.
It is a 100% effective twist. Like,
so then we meet Cail as an adult, and Cail looks just like Cade, but he has a fake beard, a fake mustache, and he wears a hoodie all the time.
I mean, he's you're being unkind to this mustache and beard, which is like musketeer level times 50.
Yeah,
it's wonderful. But I'll say this: the only reason Cail looks the way he does, which is the not only does he have this mustache and beard, he also always has a hoodie. Is because the stock footage that he bought also had shots of a dude in a hoodie in some rundown building. And we'll see these earlier in the movie. And I was like, this looks really good. This has got to be stock footage because the camera's moving in a way that Breen never does. There's actually a really, really great shot of this hooded person walking down this dilapidated hallway where the camera's like craning up behind him. I think it looks like it was shot like maybe with a drone or something.
Maybe.
And it's coming up behind him and he's walking down this hallway center frame. And whenever this happens, there's always voiceover from Cade saying, "I miss my brother," and mentioning him. And even though it's stock footage, I'm like, you know, these setup shots of Cail are working.
Yeah, it was like Neil Breen actually finally got a grasp of mood.
And how to at least exploit the mood of this stock footage he bought to his own advantage. I'm genuinely impressed, like, by his ability, because he's always had stock footage in his movies, but a lot of the time it's been utilitarian in its execution.
Yeah.
This, he has figured out how to adapt it to the story he wants to tell.
No, it feels more transformative instead of just like rote usage of it. He's really
It's organic.
transforming. Yeah. The only thing that I don't like about the way that he uses the stock footage is that he'll frequently slow it down to the point where it just stops and freezes. So he does these freeze frames. And it's sometimes it actually just looks like the video is freezing. Like there has to be some sort of moving element to make it look like the movie is still going on. I thought that at a certain point, I thought the movie was just like stalled, corrupt. It was,
But yes, then we get to spend some time with Cail, who has apparently become a drug addict and is doing, he's the Neil Breen character, and that he is the one doing these vigilante actions. And of course, he's got to stop a couple of white older guys who are always villains in Breen movies.
Sure, but they're a specific kind of white guy. They're businessmen and lawyers and politicians.
They are suits with a capital S. He stops these guys and he points a gun at them and I guess teleports them or takes them to some room that's got a bunch of plastic tarps up on the side with fake blood everywhere.
It's like Dexter meets Saw 3 down there in his basement.
And there's this fade in to these three guys who are a little beaten up and bloody. And this fade in lasts for quite a while. And all you hear are these three guys moaning. And it sounds really pornographic.
Dude, this scene is fucking side-splitting. Between the one dude that has the fake mustache, you have like two competing fake mustaches in this scene.
Beautiful.
It's utterly brilliant. And like, I took a screenshot from this, and you're like, Neil Breen looks like he's about to drop the baddest horrorcore rap album from 1994. It's a really delicious scene, and the way he berates these three suits is just poetry.
Well, and this is textbook Breen scene. where these guys are just going to say, we've been buying politicians for years and rigging elections and funneling it into, like, where the suits reveal everything bit, which is in pretty much every Breen film.
Yep.
But the scene gets better because Neil Breen, or I should say Cail, is like, all right, you guys stay here. This is where I'm going to hold you. He shoots a couple of them in the shoulder and the leg, which, there's no, all there is the little after effect of the muzzle flash on the gun. But then the most beautiful thing happens, Travis, in which Cail leaves and then fade into all these other suits who are just copy and pasted versions of the three actors we've just seen.
Right. Is it it's probably just a metaphor that says like he's been doing this a lot, but because like we go back to these three same suits later and there aren't a whole bunch of them. So, and then, but he does repeat the shot with the whole bunch of them again later. It really does start to border on like art film where he's like, I'm going to choose this shot to make this metaphor, but I'm not going to have it be part of the diegesis of the film. I just want it to explain a feeling or get an idea across to the audience. And I'm like, he's kind of fucking getting it.
Something's happening.
Yeah. My next note was, Breen really hates lawyers, huh? Like, what happened to Neil Breen that he so hates lawyers? Was he in a really bad divorce? Like,
something happened?
Something happened, or was he in a bad lawsuit? Like, who knows? But
well, my next note is one of my favorite, like, genuinely funny, like not unintentionally funny or funny because of incompetence or whatever. I thought this was actually funny. Is Cade takes his, I guess, girlfriend, wife,
significant other. Her name is Ilana.
His significant other to the same area where this bum was, but now I guess it's been retrofitted into a restaurant.
Well, it's just an exterior that they were able to get at night that was at that particular college where they were shooting.
Right.
And it's outside of like the cafe, so there's all these bunch of like metal chairs and stuff that are set up there. And I was thinking, in typical Breen fashion, I'm like, oh, he's actually going to fashion this into a restaurant because like that's all he has to work with. And so Cade, of course, goes, here's this restaurant. We've got the best seats in the house and all this sort of stuff. I'm just like, yeah, I'm along for the ride, whatever. And then he reveals that it's all like a joke. His character actually has a sense of humor. It was so strange, like actually having that realization that he was joking.
The delivery that Breen gives in this moment might be one of his, honest to God, best pieces of acting in his oeuvre, in which he goes, they look around, we see the shot, nobody's there. Turns back to him. He says, the service is incredible. It's just friggin' invisible. That was a walk away moment for me where I was like, because I was laughing. It wasn't a walk away like I don't know how to process this. I need a second. I was genuinely laughing and like I had to get up and walk around like, oh my God, that was really funny.
No, it's insane to me to actually see a Neil Breen character have like a legitimate sense of humor.
Well, and a sense of self-awareness.
Yeah, the self-awareness is a big thing too, but like for his characters to actually make jokes in his movies, which are some of the funniest we've ever talked about in the show, but seem to be completely unaware that they're funny. This one is actually like, no, what if the character was really funny and had a sense of humor? Like, suddenly I found this relationship between Cail and Alana incredibly endearing. Like, this scene actually manages to synthesize something like romance.
I would say this and the plate of spinach on top of manila folders scene from Fateful Findings. And when they start tossing the files up, those are the two most, like, he gets it. Like, he's aware that this is supposed to be funny and fun, and it's actually making his characters mean something. And then the best thing is, like, it's like, I got you a present. And it's just this little candle, and Alana just goes, a candle. It's so sweet.
I started to really like their relationship. Like, I was rooting for them.
Oh, that'll come around. But we do eventually get the first scene between Cail and Cail, and this is Breen having to have both versions of himself in the same shot. However, in this sequence where he's talking to himself, already I'm like, well, the eye line isn't quite there, but that's fine. I'll forgive that.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that drove me insane is that because this is green screen, he's got this green screen side of a brick building. Every time he actually cuts to different angles on Cail or Cail, but the background and its angle never changes.
Yeah, they stay the same. It's really jarring.
It's visually difficult for me to look at when they kept cutting. I was like, oh no, Breen, you were doing so good.
Yeah.
After this, we do get to spend a little more time. We get to see, like, what's Cail been up to other than copy and pasting evil lawyers and stuff in a Dexter room. He apparently has some kind of girlfriend, and they're both druggies together.
Yeah, this brought me right back to Jim and his horrible frigid wife in Fateful Findings. Booze
Yes.
and pills in the bed.
Yes, and in this scene, I was reminded that you never have to concern yourself about what Breen's characters might be thinking, because they will always tell
They'll
you.
let you know.
and they're fighting, and his girlfriend just says, I don't want you anymore. I just want the drugs and the money.
And then she hits him, and the sound effect when she hits him is just musical. I mean, it is like the most perfect library, like, punch sound. He couldn't have picked a better punch sound for that moment. And then it's the same kind of domestic drama stuff, you know, the pills, get off the pills.
While I was watching that scene, they're both hitting each other and they're on drugs, and I'm like, okay, yeah, they're pretty fucked up. And then Cail goes, we're both fucked up.
It's like he's reading your mind. It really
Well,
is
then-
like he's beginning to anticipate the audience.
Well, then we get introduced to a new character, Travis.
Yes. So
The
there
villain
is-
of the piece.
There is an antagonist in this film. So the agency that, of course, employs Cail informs him that he's going to have to go on some sort of mission to take down this guy who's like an art collector, artsy weirdo, sort of James Bond style villain. And the artsy villain is this dude named Cooze.
Cooze.
How did you spell it in your notes?
Cooze.
I spelled it Kooz.
Okay.
So that was just, you know, both of us taking a flying leap at all this sort of stuff.
But what does the credits reveal it as?
Cuzzx.
The X is silent, like Django. But I love Cooze's introduction because it fades in to a room where, like, like black tarps have been put on the wall and on the table, and it's this close up of this just little bowl with a bunch of fake diamonds in it, and a hand comes in and just starts rubbing the diamonds, and it looks like a YouTube ASMR video.
Oh yeah, and the hand has this enormous fucking fake diamond ring on it. And then after that goes on for God knows how long, we cut to a wider shot to actually introduce Cooze, and Cooze looks like Michael Stipe in a black dress shirt with a horrible scarf, red sunglasses. And I don't mean like black frames, red lenses. I mean, like, no, they're entirely red. And then he's wearing like a Kangol hat. the reveal, like cutting to that shot, is some of the most brilliant comedy ever, because like Neil Breen has to know that this character is completely ridiculous. Like, he consciously gave this character like a sidekick sort of hench person.
Oh my gosh.
Called the Winged Muse, and I called her the Pixie Woman. It's literally a woman surrounded by like a sparkling aura with a pair of pixie wings on.
And when we say pixie wings, I'm talking like little girl Party City costume pixie wings.
I mean, I would expect nothing less, but not only does Cooze have all of this crazy aesthetic weirdness going on, like Cooze has a fucking style.
I mean, I think this is Neil Breen's idea of a comic book supervillain.
Yeah, but like a comical one. Like, it's almost a character out of a Kingsman movie.
Yeah, I mean, in this scene, my favorite bit is when we see Pixie Lady. They're outside, like on a porch area, and she's about maybe 10 feet away from Cooze.
Sparkling.
And she teleports 10 feet to him. Like... For no reason, like, she just does. It's like, okay, I guess that's a thing she could do. Cool.
And maybe it's a virtual reality thing, but there's also scenes where she's the only perspective character in the scene later on. So it's like, who is this being? So not only does Cooze have all that shit going on, he also has a voice like he just did every Whippet on the planet.
I'm Cooze. Yeah, well, and I guess there's something going on where Cade is pretending to try and ingratiate himself to Cooze, because it's something like, we can work together, like something like that. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. It just sets up like, okay, Cooze is the bad guy. Fine.
Yeah, Neil Breen gets a secret identity from the agency director, the one with the white hair, to go meet him.
Right.
And then he's trying to uncover Cooze's plans for global domination, because Cooze has an empire, evidently, the Cooze Empire.
So it's like, okay, this is going to be our main setup for Cade's conflict in the movie. So we already had the reveal with, what was her name? Alana,
the wife.
Alana. And it's like, okay, they're a couple. Well, later, Cade and Alana are standing out on some balcony or porch or something, and it's at night, which most of this movie takes place in, and we can see a skyline behind them as they're looking out. This was the reveal of the movie that broke me, because all of a sudden, there are 2 moons in the sky.
I really like how...
I have no answer.
I mean, I don't either, but I like just how far Breen is embracing the outright lunacy of this world. I mean,
there's never anything brought up about this. Like, is this taking place on another planet? Is this some kind of Matrix scenario where this is in some kind of simulation? Doesn't matter.
He's like any other filmmaker in that he's just trying to do what he thinks is cool.
Yep, and that's fine.
He probably was just motivated by saying, like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there were 2 moons in the sky in this shot?
Which, great.
You know what, Neil Breen? It would be really fucking cool, and I'm so happy you did it.
I'll never forget it.
I can't explain really anything deeper about it, but I love you for it. Thanks, Neil.
I also think Twisted Pair is a lot more comparable to Fateful Findings than I think his other stuff, because there's stuff in this that I've only really seen in Fateful Findings. For example, magical objects, which is such a huge part of Fateful Findings fabric. There are magical objects, not just in the technological sense. In Cooze's little area, there are these 3 spotted cat statues. I mean, that sounded like a defeated sigh.
No, actually, I think it's delicious. I mean, Cooze is... I mean, we've called Neil Breen's character like a stack of hats. You know, they just have to wear so many hats. Like, Cooze has so many delightful, delectable details about him.
It's a weird piece of flavoring that's never explained. That the little cat statues, one of them will like turn around unmotivated by anything else going on in the scene. I don't know what function they serve, but...
You know what it reminds me of, and I didn't think about this until just now, is that fucking John Frankenheimer Richard Stanley, Dr. Moreau movie. Marlon Brando's like, I want him to have a Vern Troyer double who like plays the piano, and we're going to have a smaller piano, like just coming up with these crazy ideas that this villain character would have.
I'm here for it.
I'm totally here for it.
But I think we mentioned this with his lighting. His big trick in this one is that he'll have this single beam of light in a scene. Everything else will be darker, but there'll be this one striking almost spotlight that cuts through the middle of the frame.
It's like he just tightened the barn doors down on his light really, really tight, so it only shows this stripe of light.
And he does this all throughout the movie, and I think it's kind of great. It's a piece of filmmaking style that is so repetitive that it's clear he was aware of it and was experimenting with it. And it's unlike anything else in his filmography as far as his approach to doing certain things with filmmaking.
Well, he's doing stuff like he knows when actors are going to step into the beam of light, so he'll block his scenes accordingly. That's a big evolution. And some of the stuff that's set in the university halls at night, like him just sort of palling around with Alana. Alana, for whatever reason, her job is in the same building that he works out of. So they, smooch in the elevator, little surreptitious smooch. They find a little room sometime in the middle of the night to go and make out in. And you see some of these lighting choices in scenes like this, and it's just like, this is a new side to Breen.
How clever did you feel for Breen during that elevator scene where they step into an elevator and the doors close and they're all normal? And then they open up again and they're doing we got to stop making out. And to him, he's like, this is supposed to be seen as a cut to where the elevator has actually gone up some floors, but it is all in the same shot. So it looks like the elevator door closes and then opens right back up. But I know in his mind, he thought, yeah, the audience will think that this is it's moved.
Yeah, but like I understood his intention. And what's odd is you and I, our brains are so warped, I think, from watching Neil Breen's movies that we're just sort of accustomed to his shenanigans. And it's stuff like that where I'm just like, yeah, I understood what he was going for. And, but I understand like a new viewer is not going to have that same understanding. Like if this is your first Neil Breen film, it's definitely going to cause some like frustrations or like epiphanies, with stuff like that, like, the implied cut that isn't there. But for us, like we've just realized that this is part of Breen's art style. Like this is how he views things, and things like not changing the brick background when cutting back and forth between the close up and the reverse and the scenes between Cade and Cail in front of the brick wall. We've just come to accept this as part of his style, and we know exactly what he's trying to do or what kind of thing he's trying to imitate. And so it doesn't seem all that out of the ordinary for us.
That's a good point.
But what really did seem out of the ordinary is like just how far Neil Breen was willing to push himself in this movie by doing things like, I don't really shoot night exteriors or really any like good dark interiors. I'm going to make a commitment in this shoot to do night exteriors a lot and then a lot of night interiors, so him changing his style consciously to do that. And then also leaning into, I think, expectations a little bit of like what people who like his films might expect from this, and starting to maybe defy those expectations a little bit and show those evolutions. Like I'm legitimately impressed. And it's things like the Pixie Women or the Two Moons that are just otherwise unexplainable, but add so much incredible flavor to the film.
There's more decisions like that. Cade starts sneaking around this college, which is, I guess, a place where Cooze is doing some kind of genetic experiment. There's talk about like genetic mutants or something.
Yeah. Cooze is building an army of mutants to take over the world.
Yes. And we see a couple freeze framed guys in gas masks with machine guns that walk around. That is like the squad Cade has to deal with later.
There's people in black suits with black hats and black sunglasses and skinny little black ties that look like the ska man, sort of, the skanking man in the black suit,
So he's sneaking around this place. And eventually in this place, he runs into Cooze, but somehow, for some reason, Cooze has turned into Ed Asner.
It's just suddenly a different actor. And they do the same effect on the voice, but it's just like, I guess he just couldn't get the Cooze guy on that day. From Michael Stipe to Ed Asner.
Well, and I remember in the credits, I don't think there's 2 actors listed for Cooze.
There aren't.
So what the fuck?
Who was that guy?
So suddenly, here's this other guy, and he's yelling at him, and it's just Ed Asner. Then we do check back in with Cail, who's still, I guess, fighting with his druggy girlfriend, and they're tossing drugs at each other.
We're done.
Well, yes. Well, I wrote remix in my notes here because it's literally the moment plays twice.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that the audio just does, the actual footage plays twice.
Yeah, it's like
him
suddenly like Spring Breakers. It's like the remix of the film. But what my favorite part of the scene is not that. It's when they're trying to split up the drugs between the 2 of them. And it's like 2 Mentos for me, 6 Benadryl for you. Like, it looks like candy. Like, he's just sort of pushing these little pills over on the pillow. Like, you get these and we get these. And evidently, like, now that they're able to afford their drugs because, I don't know, I guess Cail's vigilantism is really paying off. His girlfriend goes, Cail, I'm so content now. And he says, me too, babe. And they've got this mirror with all these lines of Coke on it and these bottles of wine. Oh, they're so happy. They can't even afford lights in their domicile. This
mirror with the Coke lines is just sitting between them, and they have their white wine. It's always white wine. Neil Breen doesn't like red wine, I don't think. He's always got white wine in his movies. That or champagne.
It's champagne, yeah.
But then there's this extended sequence, kind of the climax of the Cooze section of the movie with Cade escaping.
He blows
the
up
squads of guys. Oh. He blows up what looks like stock photos of a sewage plant.
He blows up all of Cooze's pipes. Evidently, Cooze's empire is an empire built on pipes, and if you blow the pipes up, you defeat the Cooze.
But the best thing about this is we're seeing him, and there's some voiceover about like, "Oh, I'm stopping your empire, Cooze." It cuts back to the Michael Stipe Cooze actor. In the same shot that we first met him in, where he's sitting at a table, he says nothing. He's just sitting there. No reaction to anything or what's going on. And then it just cuts back up to these pipes blowing up.
Well, and eventually we know Cooze has been defeated because we see the same shot of like the hand in the big bucket of diamonds that we saw earlier, but the hand is bloody.
Yes, so Cooze is...
we know Cooze is down. So that's the big conflict of the movie, I guess, like the global conflict that he tries to prevent. But really, that is so easily dealt with. Like, it's more about the familial drama where it's like, will Cade and Cail reunite to do good? And, you know, like, will there be a scene where they try to reconcile? And yeah, that does come about. And then the big reveal of the film for me is that Ilana has been working for the other side all along.
Well, okay, yes. There's an earlier scene in which Cade and Ilana are lying in bed together. And as we've said, nobody gets out of bed like Neil Breen. In this moment, there's a close-up on Breen. He's laying. He immediately shoots straight up out of bed and just goes, "Who's there?
Yeah.
Who's there?"
And I love that Ilana stays dead asleep while he's shouting into the dark bedroom, I know somebody's there. She's fucking dead asleep.
It's great. And so there's some implication that maybe Cail is a spiritual force or something that's haunting Cade, because there's an earlier kind of dreamy scene where Cade is looking into a mirror and he sees Cail, and then...
This is my favorite shot of the film, actually.
This is the most Fateful Findings moment of the movie.
It's a direct repeat of the shot from Fateful Findings where Breen walks up to the mirror in Fateful Findings and is standing there in front of the mirror looking at his reflection, and then he walks away and his reflection stays. But in this one, it's Cade on one side, Cail on the other. And Cade walks away and there's Cail standing there in the mirror, and then the mirror shatters. So it's like he's offering these different twists on like familiar things. And I think like the shattering of the mirror, whether it's intended or not, is a really powerful symbol for Breen saying like, look, I can do these things again and again, but I got to break the mirror. It's the fucking Last Jedi tree burning.
When you say the mirror shatters, what that really means is that some shards of glass get dropped in from above the frame.
By the same force that was sprinkling glitter in Fateful Findings, I'm sure.
Yes.
Salt Bay.
But yes, as you said, it is revealed that Ilana has been working for the other side, whoever they are. And at one point, Cade is walking and he bumps into somebody who thinks he's Cail and seems to be a former girlfriend of Cail's.
And she's like, I know you used to have a beard. And then what does he say?
I never had a beard.
I never had a beard. I never had a beard.
Of course, he's got to repeat it a bunch of times. So apparently he's trying to find Cail or hunt him down or something. But then Travis, this movie has continually made us, stand up and walk away. The moment of the movie where you literally, you were watching it before I did. This was the only piece of the movie that you shot video of and had to send it to me.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
We cut to an interior of a house and there's a home theater. There's like seats set up. There's a big screen on the wall. There's a projector. You can see like a subwoofer. And we think like, oh, it's probably Neil Breen's home theater. And the pixie woman, Cooze's, winged muse, is just standing there in the corner of the room sparkling. And she's watching something on the screen. She's watching a Neil Breen film. She's watching Pass Through.
So not only is that mind breaking, like, what is this? Like, so this is a universe in which Neil Breen movies exist. But before that, we're panning across the home theater. And there is a poster for a movie that I never thought I would see ever in anything else. It is Kurt Wimmer's Ultraviolet.
The only possible scenario that this could have been funnier was if it was Chronicles of Riddick.
Well, 50 Shades has that covered for you. But
well, I mean, that's why it would have been funnier to me. But
yes,
the fact that like Ultraviolet, and not only is the poster just like it's not just tacked to the wall, it's in a lit frame. Like Ultraviolet, like Neil Breen was like, oh yeah, this is going on the wall.
Well, that's I want to believe that is Neil Breen's home theater system, that is his room, and that he has a poster. And here's the even better thing. It's not better, but it's just by comparison makes things better. The only other poster we see is for Finding Nemo.
Sure.
It's right next to the screen. I'm like, Ultraviolet and Finding Nemo. If those are two windows into what, because Neil Breen's not somebody that I've seen interviews or a lot of discussion what he thinks about other movies or what his influences are or anything.
Well, you have on one side the Sweet Sacker and stuff, and on the other side the like futuristic techno stuff. You've got your Ultraviolet and you've got your Finding Nemo. These are the two warring halves of Neil Breen.
It makes sense, but yes, so this, and then you put Pass Through playing on the fucking theater, and then the Pixie Woman disappears and there's a close-up on her shoes which have spikes on them, and they're also now filled with diamonds. Was she the diamonds in the ASMR bowl?
Sure, yeah. So Cade and Alana have their big shootouts. They shoot at one another. Alana dies, and I think honestly it's the best Breen romance. Even though he has to kill her, I actually felt like, oh no, I don't want this to end. Like it didn't have the super dumb like childhood romance element that like all his other romances have had. This felt like something that he really took the time to build like as an adult relationship in this film. And they have this scene sort of in the pink purple tree space that we saw earlier, like the sort of spiritual space. And she has a moment where she tells him like, Cade, I will love you for all of eternity. And then she fades away. He has to say goodbye. And then fucking Cade turns to the camera and says, everyone has the right to be loved. Everyone has the right to love in peace. And then he takes his fingers and then he points toward his heart and his fingers light up and he says, I'll be right here.
That actually, like, that happens. He directly references E.T.
He's fucking... It's awesome. It's awesome.
It is the best possible note you could leave the movie on.
Roll credits. And during the credits, we get a couple of really fucking awesome gems. We learn that Cade Altair will return.
He did a James Bond will return gag. Like, he is franchising.
And then we find out the spelling of Cooze, which is just another delightful reveal that the movie has. We find out that he misspells detective twice as detective. And then we see the credit for the eagle, which says Astro Eagle as Eagle. Count me in. I'm fucking signed up for whatever's coming next for Cail, auteur. And then you stay to the end and there's a little tag. There's a little tag with Cail.
I mean, that was what I was going to say. He's learned from modern, the MCU and filmmaking. There's a post-credit stinger where we see both Cail and Cail, and they're smiling into the camera, and then at the same time, both their smiles fade.
Mm-hmm.
And then it fades out. I'm like, what? What's going to happen? And Travis, I need Twisted Pair 2 more than I think any other movie that's currently slated to come out that I know about.
I am astonished at how much I like this movie. I think it sits at number 2 in my Breen ranking, and that's pretty high. Like, Fateful Findings sets a really high bar.
Yeah.
Because Fateful Findings has this degree of what feels like ineptitude about it, and that sort of makes it really special. What is so incredible about Twisted Pair is that it stops feeling inept, and it starts feeling more like an art film. It really does start to feel more like there's more intentionality in the authorship. You know what I mean? Like, he knows what he's doing. It's a crazy feeling because it still has the Breen essence, but it feels more purposeful.
I would argue that Twisted Pair is by far Breen's most capable movie in both the script and the execution. It's still, like you said, got all the hallmarks that you want from a Breen project. But at the same time, it's clear that he's not just making the same movie over and over again, that he's not resting on his laurels, that he is trying to, if not improve, he is at least trying to do more things, to not rest on certain laurels as far as his storytelling or his approach to filmmaking. There is, like we've continued to say, a genuine sense of evolution that I think you need to have seen the rest of the Breen filmography, hopefully as chronologically as you can, to see that happen. Twisted Pair is really, really fun, especially after Pass Through. Like you said, it feels like his most crowd-pleasing. The fact that he is teasing a sequel even said, like, this is his attempt at making something he believes is, for his niche, mass marketable.
Mm-hmm. Now, I was going to be there for whatever Breen did next thing because I'm a sucker for this guy's stuff. But just knowing that he's planning on keeping this particular thing going is more than all right with me. And if you want to see things that feel sort of similar, if you wanted to have that same sensation, evoked, you would definitely go to the shelf to do that. The shelf is where we like to pull off recommendations or perhaps substitutions for movies that we review here on Genre Vision. Drew, what are you pulling off the shelf today?
Well, if you want another science fiction extravaganza that is absolutely ridiculous and features, I guess you could say, cloned or multiple versions of the lead character, there's a movie called The One, starring one Jet Li, but not one Jet Li. There are many Jet Lis. And the Jet Lis are fighting to be the one because they're Jet Lis from different universes.
It's like the Jet Li gauntlet.
Yes. And The One is absolutely over the top silly. This is one of Jet Li's English speaking pictures. It is cartoonish in the extreme. My memories of it, my big memory is at one point because, of course, the one character who I have to imagine this came out post Matrix, is super powered, has super strength, super agility, and is also Jet Li.
I remember him waving around a motorcycle at one point.
That is the key image from this movie. Is at the end, I believe he's fighting off all the other evil Jet Lis, and he is swinging around a motorcycle, beating them up with it. It's glorious.
Sounds great.
Jason Statham's also in it.
Oh, good.
So it's gonzo cartoony, but totally aware of it, and I think a fun movie. And it's the movie that immediately popped into my head talking about Twisted Pair, but I haven't seen it in a while, so I'm probably going to revisit it, and hopefully you will too, audience. But Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Twisted Pair?
If you want to evoke that Breen feeling in other films, here's one for you. This is a movie where a couple has absurd shouting arguments at one another.
I know what this is.
And the man is a spy.
Oh, okay.
This is Possession. The crazy gonzo art film by Polish director Andrzej Żuławski. This stars Sam Neill and Isabelle Adjani. This is like a crazy breakup film where the spy returns home and tells his wife that he wants a divorce, and then everything spirals outward from there. They both go completely nuts, and all sorts of weird eldritch tentacled horrors start to appear in the film. It is an absolute must-see gonzo film, but the absurdist, like, screaming, shouting arguments that these people have occasionally kind of came to mind when I would see Neil Breen and a woman yelling at one another in his films.
There's also a very Breen-esque fight scene in Possession.
True,
in which Sam Neill goes and confronts the person that he believes Isabelle Adjani is cheating on him with, and they have this fight scene that is so funny. And it's like shot in slow-mo and pretending it's so aware that it's ridiculous and trying to be like very action-packed and dramatic, but the choreography of it is so silly and knowingly so. Yeah, Possession, I think, is one of the most unique films I've ever seen.
It's not an easy watch, but I think it's kind of a critical watch if you like sort of out there genre cinema. The fringes of genre cinema are a place where Neil Breen exists, but it's also a place where art films like Possession exist. So please see that. Just, be prepared going in. What have our listeners picked for shelf picks for the previous week?
Well, last week we covered the film Underwater, and we got a handful of shelf picks. Listener Bella Lugosi recommended Shocking Dark by Bruno Mattei. Has seen this. This is pretty much Bruno Mattei's riff on Aliens and The Terminator. If you like that kind of direct Italian cheesy ripoff type stuff, I recommend it. I think in Italy it was known as Terminator 2. It came out before the actual Terminator 2.
Yes, I believe you're correct. Kind of like how they did a second Alien movie in Italy.
Right. Loyal listener Mr. Milksteak, their recommendation for Underwater was The Descent. Of course, The Descent is great.
And creature classic.
A very simplistic idea that executes its premise really well, and most importantly, I think develops really great characters. And last but not least, loyal listener Palefire was not the biggest fan of Underwater, and his shelf pick was the film Paul. This is starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and also Seth Rogen as a wisecracking CG alien. And Palefire's reasons say it's another film that just rolls by with nary an interesting or terribly bad thing going on.
I agree with him on that.
I felt similarly about Paul. Yeah, it's like it's fine. I had no beef with it.
It beats a kick in the nuts, but there are many more things I would rather watch than Paul.
That's all for the shelf. So let's do some currently consuming. Nom 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 nom. Travis, what's been on your plate?
Very briefly, I wanted to highlight two podcasts that I've been listening to recently, and these are podcasts that, either I've not had a consistent listening schedule or they haven't had a consistent release schedule. In the case of the first one, it's all about the release schedule, but this has changed. Vox has a gaming website called Polygon. Polygon was created by Justin McElroy, and he and his brother Griffin McElroy, who are now sort of, big people in the podcasting community, had a podcast for Polygon called Besties, which is about the best games in any sort of given time period. And so I think they used to do best games, like they might have at one point been on a weekly release schedule, and then they did a monthly one, and then they started to go to a yearly, and then the podcast died. Well, what happened recently is that it got picked up by Spotify as a Spotify exclusive podcast. So now the only way you can listen to this podcast is on Spotify. I'm so happy to have the podcast back in my life, though, because it's Justin McElroy, Griffin McElroy, Russ Frushtick, and Chris Plant, for wonderful voices from the Polygon site that really define that site's voice. I'm just so happy to hear them talking about games again. They spent a recent episode talking all about the recent expansion to Shovel Knight. So you might actually enjoy them talking about that, because they're all really funny. They're all incredibly smart. They understand game design really, really well. They talk about, the sort of game theory aspects of game design, what's the gameplay loop and what sort of keeps you hooked and things like that. Highly recommended.
Nice.
The next podcast I want to talk about is another McElroy adjacent thing. It's hosted by three sisters, the sisters Smurl, Sydney, Taylor, and Riley. The podcast is called Still Buffering, and it's undergoing a change. The youngest sister, Riley, is about to turn 20. The podcast used to be about these two older sisters who are, I think, currently 36 and 34, Sydney and Taylor, and they're talking to their much younger sister who is, was born while these two others were teenagers. So you have two millennials, and then you have a Gen Z member of the family, and they basically talk about the generational differences between, Riley as a teen and then these other two as millennial adults. But now that Riley is not going to be a teenager anymore, the actual structure and the whole conceit of the podcast is changing. They're becoming a media discussion podcast. And they're going to review movies and talk about music. Like, they choose a different piece of media to talk about every week. And the show has evolved quite a bit. Like, Riley used to be this little kid on the show, and she grew in confidence and is now a great podcaster, just like her other two sisters. And the fact that they're now dissecting media with a female perspective is great. They're really, really fun to listen to. They're on the Maximum Fun Network. I highly recommend Still Buffering. Anyway, that's all I want to talk about I'm currently consuming for today. What, sir, have you been currently consuming?
Well, it finally hit digital, so I decided to check it out because why not? I saw Terminator Dark Fate, a movie I was not interested in at all. And then there were responses to the movie that were very positive that got me a little interested, but my main beef is with the Terminator movies is that they keep doing the same story over and over again. And that's certainly the case with Terminator Dark Fate. Everyone's trying to be Terminator 2 again.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of the script, I think it's a pretty decent movie.
Really? Because I thought the direction looked really flat.
Well, this is from Tim Miller, who did Deadpool, so the only time he comes alive is in the big action sequences. Most of that, again, it's not spectacular, but something I have always been very kind or very thankful about with the Terminator movies is, for the most part, they are shooting actual locations for action sequences. For the most part. It's not a whole bunch of green screen void space stuff, except later in the climax when they're on this big plane and all that just looks super video gamey, which makes sense because Tim Miller came from the video game world. There's a highway chase that I think is probably the standout action set piece, but it's really early in the movie and nothing else kind of ever compares to it. There was a point after, I think the movie had maybe about 40 minutes left, where the worst thing happened, where I was like, I just want this to be over. That feeling sunk in where none of this is really clicking anymore. It's not presenting itself in an interesting way, and the story has played all its cards, and none of them were really enticing or invigorating. I don't want to get into spoilers or anything at this point. If people want to see the movie, it's interesting. The last movie, Terminator Genisys, is, I think, the worst movie in the franchise by a mile. But in that way, it's actually now kind of more interesting just how bad it is and how convoluted and ridiculous that film is. Terminator Dark Fate feels like a very modern, boring approach to IP filmmaking, which is got to give the people what we think they want, which is just the same thing repackaged in a new way. I think as a Terminator sequel, it's really not going to win any fans for reasons that I won't get into. And it's a bummer because I think the Terminator universe has a lot to play with, but there's nothing going on in this story that you haven't seen before. And the movie thinks you haven't and thinks there's kind of new twists it can turn into it. But a lot of it is just kind of pandering and not as big of a surprise as it thinks it is.
That's a damn shame.
I mean, I know you were somewhat interested in it because we both like the Terminator series, and certainly the first movie, I think, I feel safe saying between the two of us is a movie we have immense love for.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know what the future holds for. I know this didn't do very well domestically. I don't know about its foreign performance, but I think somebody needs to come into the Terminator franchise and do something radically different.
I don't know if anybody would show up. They certainly didn't show up in droves for Dark Fate, but would they show up for something that promised a really different time? I have no idea.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's just a matter of, and this is something I've thought about in a movie I think have to revisit at some point with Terminator Salvation. That movie is the right approach to what needs to be done with the franchise, but it seems like the worst execution, I guess, from my memory.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of bad things about that. But there's so much, I would say every single Terminator sequel has a good idea in it. And there's a good idea in Dark Fate. Again, I can't talk about it without getting into spoilers, but they never really branch off from their best ideas. They kind of get stuck on just stuff you've seen before. If not in other Terminator movies, then in the case of Terminator Salvation, other more popular science fiction movies. So I don't know, Dark Fate, it's nice seeing Linda Hamilton. It's clear like she's here for this. If you like the Terminator 2 version of Sarah Connor, you'll get more of that. She's fine. Arnold, there's a part of me that feels like Arnold shouldn't even have been in the movie. So it's a disappointment. I really did not enjoy it in even the ways I wish I could have. But there's little things about it that I think people will like conceptually. But yeah, skip it.
Too bad. All right, let's do our comment of the week. This week's comment of the week comes from Pale Fire. This was his commentary about the movie Underwater. In our review of Underwater, we talked about how we thought the adjective derivative was not a particularly good one for film criticism, but he comes up with an argument on why he thinks derivative is a good adjective. This is a comment I urge you all to read. Just go to genrevision.com, click on the post for Underwater, and scroll down to the comment section. You can see his argument for the use of that adjective. It's always important that we get contrasting views and open a dialogue on things that we don't always agree on. So thank you, Pale Fire, again for leaving that comment.
I do want to say, this is our last Breen episode for the foreseeable future. And, it's been a great saga and a great journey to go on with you, Travis. It's been one of my favorite, like top 3 easy favorite things that we've decided to do for this show.
I don't remember who recommended this to me, or to us, really. I think it was a Chud commenter who said that we should do Fateful Findings. And we took that suggestion, and it has opened up this entire new world of independent filmmaking to us. This guy has such a specific method, and I'm so glad that we discovered him through our listeners. And the fact that you all continue to show up for Neil Breen reviews is always encouraging. So thank you. Thank you for being on this journey with us, listener.
Well, next week we'll be joined by our Genre Vision sister, Danny Ryan. Hi, Danny.
Hello, Danny.
We're going to be doing something fun. We're talking everything Jackass. Yes, the Jackass franchise series, whatever you want. The show, the movies. We're bringing Danny on because she is an expert at the entire Jackass family of media. And there was just announced that there's going to be a Jackass 4. If that's happening, I'm flabbergasted, and was one of the impetuses behind us doing that. So we're going to be talking about everything Jackass, and I think we'll touch on a little bit our history and as far as the context of all that at the time. And I'm very interested to see our differing perspectives on this. I think it's something that's going to be really fun and very different for us here at Genre Vision. So we hope you'll be back next week to check that out. As always, we want to thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we'll see you next week.
Right here on Genre Vision.